In a rural town, a siren rings out. A layer of fog descends, clouding your view. At any moment, a series of demonic-looking creatures lunge out of the thick fog, wishing for nothing but the end of your life. Add in some curiously hokey acting and creepy yet somehow relaxing music, and what do you got? If you said Silent Hill, well, you're not wrong. Just as a DeLorean model car evokes memories of Back to the Future, the image of a ghost town covered in fog is immediately attributable to Silent Hill. Any other creative work that uses this aesthetic suffers this immediate comparison. But is it always fair to do this? It depends. Because the original Silent Hill games did such an archetypally good job with its presentation, manipulating any element of that presentation to suit a new project could spell disaster. If I were to give my full trust to anybody to make a Silent Hill type game while also making it distinct, one of the few people that would earn it is the director of the first game, Keiichiro Toyama. Some of you might not know, however, that the only game that Keiichiro worked on in the Silent Hill series was the first one. He left Konami soon after that to work on a new project, a project that would be the reinvention of the Silent Hill formula. That reinvention is an underappreciated gem of the survival horror genre, and I'd like to give it some well-earned love and respect. The name of that project is Siren. Many people have never heard of this game. Hell, I never heard of it until a bunch of you started requesting Siren in my comment sections. I gotta be honest, I never gave the requests much thought. No offense, by the way. As you can imagine, I get a lot of game analysis requests. But what made me decide to bump Siren to the front of the list was when my girlfriend asked if I had played it. When I said no, we soon made plans to sit down and play through it, using her original PS2 copy. I understand her enthusiasm now. On the one hand, my identity on YouTube is synonymous with my Silent Hill analysis, so to not have heard of Siren was borderline sacrilegious. But on the other hand, Siren is a game that managed to do that impossible task of taking the Silent Hill formula and reinventing it. The result was something that was quite progressive for the time. You won't find many of the same game mechanics, puzzles, or storytelling outside of Siren, and understandably so. The difficulty of this game was far greater than any of the Silent Hill games that it was compared to. Its non-linear narrative is an immediate turnoff to those who simply want to be entertained. Heck, I'll even agree with some of the critics of this game who say that some of the puzzles make no sense. But having said that, I found that by keeping an open mind and pushing forward, that this game possesses a level of genius that cannot be found in any other game from that genre. Today, I will explain in detail why this game deserved more credit and more success than it received. I will do this without spoilers for the majority of the video, just in case some of you are encouraged to try Siren out for yourselves. There will be a point later on in the video where I analyze and explain the in-depth lore behind Siren, and that will contain spoilers. But don't worry, I will provide time codes in the description box so you know when to hit mute. With that said, let's conclude the Spooktober celebrations by taking a look at Siren. In Japan, in the mountains of Misumi County, lies a fictional village known as Hanuda. This village is famous for its urban legends and tragedies, ranging from supposed sightings of a legendary serpent known as the Tsuchinoko to the mass slaying of innocents in 1938. It is also famously associated with the number 3. For example, the 1938 slaughter took the lives of 33 innocents. In 1976, a Category 6 earthquake killed 33 people in that area. There's also the myth of a cosmic god who comes to Hanuda every 333 years. Putting it simply, the village of Hanuda is a hotbed for unexplained and seemingly supernatural phenomena. At the beginning of Siren, we are introduced to a young man who has taken notice of this town and its peculiar history, a teenager named Kiyoya Suda. One day, he decides to ride his bike to Hanuda, hoping to find the truth behind these mysterious events. When he arrives there, his bike breaks down, forcing him to wander through the woods at night. While seeking help, he stumbles across what seems to be some sort of religious ceremony. When his presence is noticed by those performing the ceremony, he attempts to flee, but his path is crossed by a demonic-looking police officer. The officer begins to open fire on Kyoya, forcing him to defend himself. Kyoya jumps into a nearby truck and mows the officer down. When Kyoya jumps out of the vehicle to see if the officer is dead, an earthquake erupts and a loud siren blares. When this happens, the police officer revives, points his gun at Kyoya, and fires, injuring him and making him tumble off a nearby cliff. Strangely, Kyoya survives the fall and the gunshot wound. Not only that, it seems as if he's barely scarred. Before he can begin to inquire as to why this is, a priestess named Hisako Yao comes to his aid. She explains Kyoya's immediate recovery by pointing to the red water nearby. According to Hisako, the red water provides the gift of immortality to those who might drink enough of it, and Kyoya already has some of it coursing through his veins. Hyako then encourages Kyoya to follow her to a nearby chapel, where they can be safe from other demonic entities like the police officer that shot Kyoya. From this moment, the story will begin to shift to 9 other characters, all of whom either resided in Hanuda or were motivated to travel there for their own specific reason. There's Tamon, a man who lost his parents in the 1976 earthquake. He returns to find out whether or not it was in fact an earthquake that killed them. A woman named Naoko traveled to Hanuda to film a documentary, only for her crew to disappear upon arrival. Long story short, every person you play as is caught up in the supernatural events that are transpiring, and it is up to you, the gamer, to help them survive. Not only that, they need to find a way to escape this demonic dimension, but before they can do that, they need to find out just what the hell is going on. I'll explain the reasons behind these supernatural events in a moment, but before we get to that, I must dedicate a portion of this video to Siren's unique gameplay and what sets it apart from other more popular titles. Though survival horror staples like Resident Evil, Dead Space, and of course Silent Hill are scary and have you minding your health at all times, you still have decent access to various forms of weaponry to defend yourself. Even if you do get hit, you can usually stack up on enough health items to create your own black market pharmacy. In Siren, you rarely get access to a weapon, and when you do, the combat is purposefully janky. If you get a weapon, which is usually a melee weapon, you have to be the right distance from your enemy and attack in a rhythmic fashion. If you miss your hit just once, chances are you're likely going to die. Unlike the previously mentioned survival horror games where you can take 5 to 7 hits before you die, Siren only allows you to take 1 or 2, and when you die, you have to start the level all over again. The game encourages you to avoid this tedium by employing a stealthy approach at virtually all times. But even doing this has its share of difficulty. It's difficult to see more than a few feet in front of you due to near omnipresent darkness and fog, and the demons you fight are usually pretty quiet. So what does one do in order to survive? This is where Siren's unique core mechanic comes into play, an ability known as Sight Jack. Every playable character in Siren has the ability to look through the eyes of other conscious beings in the level, both friendly and unfriendly NPCs. To do this, you hold down the L2 button on your controller and then move the left analog stick in the direction of the NPC you wish to sightjack. It's a lot like tuning a radio to get a clear signal, except it's with your mind. If you know where your enemies are, then obviously you know which areas to avoid. But often, it's not as simple as just avoiding where the bad guys are and getting to the other side of a level. Sometimes the enemies are an integral part of completing the level. Maybe you need to make a noise near where the enemy is so you can lure them out of your path. Other times, you need to find a way to kill them before you can proceed. These moments are often very intense, because as I said before, if you make one mistake, you risk starting the level all over again. Thankfully, the difficulty generally seems fair, except for 1 or 2 sections where limited programming rears its ugly head. What doesn't often seem fair, however, are the puzzles you have to solve. Actually, no, fair isn't the right word to use here. Rather, the puzzles just don't make sense. For those of you who have played Silent Hill 2, do you remember when you had to pick up that pack of juice just so you could throw it down a garbage chute to dislodge a key? Yeah, most people were like, how the hell was I supposed to figure that out? Well, Siren takes those types of puzzles to a whole new level. Here are a couple of examples. At one point, you have to lure a zombie to a garbage chute, and you do that by dropping a light bulb into it. Now, when you see the light bulb in this game, you would think that maybe you would use it to turn on a light. But no, you gotta break it to get a zombie's attention. Then, that zombie will put his head inside the garbage chute to investigate, so that you can drop an EEG machine on his head. Want something more ridiculous than that? One objective involves finding a radio which you lower down into a well. The noise from that radio will attract a zombie, and then you push that zombie down the well, Timmy O'Toole style. Granted, that objective is an optional one, but it's still needlessly convoluted. Having said that, if you go through the usual process of elimination by using certain items at certain points of interest, you'll eventually solve all the puzzles. I imagine that some critics of Siren would attribute convolution to the story as well, even though I disagree. As I said before, the story in this game is purposefully told in a non-chronological way. After we start the game as Kyoya, we jump back a few minutes in time to play as Timon. Then we jump forward 5 hours to watch a cutscene with Kyoya, and then we go back 2 hours to play as a priest character known as Kei. Only when you complete Siren for the first time do you get the option to watch cutscenes and play levels in a clear and concise order. I understand why a lot of people would not like this form of narrative for the same reason they might not like a David Lynch film. Where some might view this as bold, avant-garde storytelling, others might see it as pretentious and generally unnecessary. For myself, I liken it to a puzzle that the player is tasked with putting together. If you're like me, where you like to dig beneath the surface to uncover a lot of interesting, well-thought-out lore and use that to piece things together, you'll get just as much of that with Siren as many of us did when playing the Silent Hill games. If you can't stand that form of storytelling though, then Siren might not be for you. Still, I recommend giving it a shot, because it's really not that hard to piece things together if you approach things with an open mind. Siren isn't like Mulholland Drive or The Shining, right? Where your understanding of the story mandates that you go online and read hours upon hours of Reddit threads. It's much easier to understand than that. The game even encourages you to go back and revisit previous levels by providing you with new objectives. By tackling these new objectives, you not only remind yourself about what already transpired, but you also get access to new scenes and additional lore items that will add to your overall understanding. Not only does this entice lore hunters like myself, but it also lures in completionists like myself. Now, speaking of the lore, I won't say that it's at the same level of quality as the lore we got in the Silent Hill games, but as a Silent Hill fan, I have to say it gets close. It helps that Siren features a lot of the same types of locations, mechanics, and story beats that Silent Hill does, without ever coming across as pure plagiarism. For example, both games feature the standard fog, a school level, and a hospital level. The world of demons is described by the same name in both games, that being the Otherworld. Moreover, that Otherworld is described in both games as a dimension existing between reality and unreality. Though these similarities exist, there are enough differences to qualify Siren as more of a spiritual successor, rather than a straight ripoff. Let's look at the religious cults in both games. In Silent Hill, the cult known as the Order worships a god that they refer to simply as God. Their god looks a lot like the pagan deity known as Baphomet. In Siren, the cult known as the Mana religion worships an alien deity known as Teratsushi. The Order's religion is a mixture of Judaism, Christianity, alchemy, and paganism. The Mana religion is a mixture of Shintoism and Greek mythology, with little hints of Christianity and some Lovecraftian elements as well. It's quite clear to me that Keiichiro Toyama had a knack for pointing out patterns between religions and using those to create his own fictional organizations. Some of the things that he comes up with and puts into Siren are absolute genius. Check out this one puzzle that you complete in the game. At one point, you have to light 4 lanterns in the area in order to advance to the next level. On each of these 4 lanterns, you will find the face of a lion, a bull, an eagle, and a human. In Christianity, these are the symbols of the 4 evangelists, as well as the faces of God that Ezekiel sees in his vision. It is also the face of a creature in Judeo-Christianity known as a cherub. There are multiple depictions of cherubs, or cherubim, but I specifically refer to the cherub that was left to guard the entrance to the Garden of Eden, after Adam and Eve were exiled. Some of you long-time Siren fans might not have noticed this, but Miyako Kajiro's dog has a name, Cherub. And it gets better. The cherub, in the Bible, guards the Tree of Life in the Garden of Eden. That tree, in case you don't know, bears fruit which grants the consumer immortality. Miyako's dog, Cherub, guards her for a similar reason. See, Miyako is a special young lady because she is the direct descendant of an ancient Hanuda villager. This villager is suspected to be Hyako Yao, the leader of the Mana religion. Hyako has been alive since 684 AD, which was when she ate the flesh of her deity and was thus cursed with eternal life. We actually see this scene take place in the game, and when the cutscene concludes, we are gifted a lore item called the Fruit of Yeda. The description of this lore item references the story of Adam, Eve, and the Tree of Life, whose fruit is said to grant eternal life. Simply put, the fruit from the Tree of Life in the Garden of Eden is likened to the flesh of Derrat. A cherub guards both the tree and those who are tainted by the blood of Derrat, which in this case is Miyako. There's more of this religious syncretism as well. In Siren, the character Tamon makes a reference to a Shinto concept known as Yomotsu Hegwe. Yomotsu Hegwe is what happens when a human being eats or drinks something that exists in the underworld. When they do that, they are not permitted to return to reality. This story bears similarity to the story of Persephone from Greek mythology. In that story, Persephone is tricked by Hades, the lord of the underworld, to eat pomegranate seeds from his realm. Upon doing this, she was cursed to stay in the underworld every time winter rolled around. In the game, if you drink too much of the water from the Red River, then you are cursed to become an immortal demon, one that also cannot leave the underworld. And, to conclude, I'm going to circle things back to Christianity. The Red River isn't a river of blood, it's both blood and water, and its source is likely to be Derrat. This bloody water is capable of flowing through one's bloodstream and gifting them eternal life, as evidenced by what Hisako says to Kyoya early in the game. The mixture of blood and water in the bloodstream might be a reference to the bloody water that exited Jesus' body when his body was pierced with a lance. In alchemy, this bloody water is referred to as the aqua permanens, the everlasting water, and apparently anybody who drank the aqua permanens, this bloody water, would be granted eternal life. This is just a sample of the genius that you can find within Siren. For the sake of time and clarity, I will refrain from discussing other aspects of the lore. This video's main purpose was to introduce Siren to those who were previously unfamiliar. If you'd like me to discuss more of Siren's mythology, or if you'd like to see me analyze the other 2 games in the series, let me know in the comments section below. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like. That helps me out a tremendous amount with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you like the work I am doing here, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put a link to that in the description box below. This video concludes the Spooktober celebrations. Have a safe and fun Halloween, everybody, and I'll see you next week. Stay yellow.